If you're plateauing on GLP-1s and feeling stuck, it doesn't mean the medication stopped working. It means you were never taught how to use a GLP-1 properly.
Well, all you got to do is agree to be more responsible about it, and you will automatically gain more control.
That's why I brought on Dr. Dean Jones, a holistic obesity specialist whose work aligns with the holistic GLP-1 method. Low dose, strategic medication combined with rebuilding the body's natural intelligence to create real, lasting results.
GLP-1s are powerful, but like anything, too much power isn't a good thing.
I'm Elizabeth McGann, your guide to doing GLP-1s the right way. To take our free How to Microdose Masterclass, just click the link in the episode description. A lot of the people that we work with are struggling with their weight, and you and I have a shared origin story. We were both overweight as kids, and I'm curious what it was like for you. I was 75 pounds heavier than I am today when I was 14, and that really imprinted on me. It was traumatic, and it set me on the path that I'm on today. And I'm curious, when you were 16, you were 300 pounds. How did that shape the work that you do today?
You know, it's huge. I am a big believer in finding a career in something that you are passionate about. And what's easier to be passionate about something that is giving back to an area that you've been able to conquer and an area that you've been able to handle, because this has been such a struggle for me, like you. So I hit 16 years old, I hit 300 pounds. And, it was from ages probably 12-ish to 16 is when the weight really started getting out of control. Seems like middle school is when I really started struggling and not accepting myself, not liking myself, and let everyone else's opinion of me apparently become more important than my opinion of me. And it just got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. I got probably as close to suicidal thoughts as I think one can get without actually letting it get to that point. But I mean, I just downright hated everything. Going to school was like the least thing that I looked forward to because of what someone was going to say to me or what group was going to say to me, and how I internalized and reacted to that. So I think this has just made me very, very passionate about helping people wherever they're at in their life, whether they're young or adult. I obviously deal with adults, not, children, but helping them as well, I think it's equally as important. So I love what I do, as I'm sure you do.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. And emotional eating. A lot of people that struggle with their weight, at the root, we could say there may be some addictive relationship with food, using it to numb your feelings, numbing and dumbing. You work with GLP-1s, and I want to hear all about your method. They're known to quiet the food noise and that addictive pattern. How do GLP-1s help with the emotional aspect of eating?
They're the only medication that we have ever had that literally, like you said, work on that part of the brain. So just as much as we are continuing to learn about the emotional piece of it and the mental piece of it, the physiological, structural part that connects to the emotion, it's hardwired in your brain. And so having a medication to work directly on that, this is the first we've ever had. And so I don't think it totally replaces any emotional work that probably needs to happen too as well, but it gives us a very quick, piercing almost way into healing, because the other stuff takes time. It takes effort, emotional therapy, whatever method an individual does to help them with that. So this is the first medication-based powerful way to just open the door into healing. And in this particular case, shut down food chatter, which for, including myself, for millions and millions of people, you can't begin healing when you're constantly eating crappy food that we're surrounded by 24/7. So, it's funny. When I first learned about semaglutide, Ozempic, the first thing I said to the doctor that actually was telling me about it, this is going to make fasting protocols easier for my patients. Like, that was the first thing I thought, because of how much fasting was already a part of myself and how we helped patients.
Yeah. So fasting was a big part of how you lost the weight originally before, because you
Correct.
lost your weight before GLP-1s existed. You
Correct.
did it old school. How did you do it?
Well, so it's funny, before fasting, actually, so I did it without fasting because back then fasting wasn't even a thing yet. And so it was the old school method, counting calories, counting macros, cardio in the morning, weight training in the afternoon. It worked. I lost 100 pounds that way. It was very, very challenging. And, my life became centered around all this effort, but I did it. Fasting wasn't even a thing. But unfortunately, it was short lived. And the first year afterwards, I found myself I gained like 50 pounds. And so immediately I had this vicious cycle where I had to sort of restart at the beginning. I usually did it, at that time, getting ready for summer, thinking about shirt off pool season. We're very young, we're very vain, and I'm like, I want to feel good about myself. And so it seemed like the same pattern after the New Year's. I would start several months, I would lose that weight, I'd get in shape good enough to feel good about myself, and then it was just this vicious cycle. I learned about intermittent fasting, and it was funny because I actually spent a year of knowing about it, not trying it, because it seemed so like, oh, that's just a fad. Like, we need protein every 3 hours. Like, you have to eat small meals throughout the day. And so, but when I tried it, I finally gave it a try because I always have an open mind. And I was like, well, why not? Right. And I noticed within the first year of just doing intermittent fasting, compressing my eating to 8 hours, all of a sudden I was able to maintain weight. It didn't solve all my problems, but all of a sudden, instead of like gaining 50, I gained like 20 that year. I was like, well, let me just keep pushing the envelope. And so that's when I started experimenting with prolonged fasting and eventually landed on a certain protocol that I created that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But it was the extended weekly long fasting that did it for me. I did a solid 3 to 6 months of that. And then I was at a healthy weight. I decreased my frequency of the long fasting, and I was just now finally able to maintain weight like everybody else. Like, it was the first time I had that stability. So
Yeah.
it was massive.
Yeah, it's huge. And when did you first find GLP-1s?
2017, 18, I think, was the first time I was exposed to them. It's never been the same since.
Yeah. And you use GLP-1s personally to maintain your weight. You're on a more
Correct.
microdosing protocol.
Correct.
Yeah, and I want to get into that more now. I love practitioners that also understand the medication personally. You have the FLOA approach, FLOA. It's an acronym. What does that stand for?
Fasting like our ancestors.
Ooh, okay. I'm so curious because fasting, the way we work with patients, the way we coach them is they use the peptide or they don't. If they're not using the peptide, a GLP-1, fasting makes so much sense. I need some education and I'm curious about how fasting can work with the GLP-1 because I'm nervous that you can lose muscle with these peptides if you're fasting. So fasting like our ancestors.
Correct.
How does that work with the
Correct.
GLP-1?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we can get into, right? So let's just focus on the muscle first, and then you feel free to expand anywhere on that. So yes, muscle loss is a concern with GLP-1 medications. It's well established in the literature that patients lose muscle loss, and that's a problem long term. But that's also a problem with all weight loss programs. All weight loss programs have the concern and well-established muscle loss aspect. And so it's not necessarily different with GLP-1s. The things that will protect muscle mass is focusing on adequate protein intake and focusing on solid resistance training. So those two established things. And then also I would say the third category is not getting into too great of a calorie deficit, because that's also going to lead to greater muscle loss. So eating enough overall, having enough protein, and then doing the right type of proper resistance training, hypertrophy style, that's how you protect GLP-1 muscle loss. On the fasting, it's the same thing, because fasting is in of itself a form of calorie restriction. It's just a different style. I like to look at fasting, the weekly long fasting, as more of a calorie cycling approach. So the same way that you protect against regular muscle loss and weight loss is the same way in fasting protocols. You just have to be intentional about surrounding the fasts with enough feasting. Hence why the title of my book is Fast, Feast, and Flourish, because I think it's so important. Most people that struggle with fasting, they don't get into that cadence, that dichotomy. You have to feast around it. If you fast and then undereat afterwards, well, now you're just starving, because on a weekly basis, your calorie deficit's too massive. You're not eating enough. So as long as you're intentional about the same thing, fasting, GLP-1s, weight loss in general, you got to have enough protein. You got to do the training. That's how you make it work.
Okay, that makes sense. And so are you fasting with your flow method? Is that fasting all week?
We broke it down into stages. So intermittent fasting, 16-8, that's stage one. It's a great way to kind of just get a patient comfortable with the idea if they've never done it. And most people know about that, right? Well, for the majority of obese individuals, intermittent fasting is just not enough. It's nowhere close. It's a good start, but it's not going to solve obesity. We work them into weekly long therapeutic fasts, 24, 36, 48 hours. So the goal is to eventually get a patient several months, and the speed at which they get into it depends on their overall health status, how stressed they are, how comfortable and ready they are mentally, because the mental piece is huge, and I'd love to talk about that later. But eventually, after a couple months, we get them into one long therapeutic fast. And then the rest of the week, they're intentional about getting enough calories, getting enough protein, and the proper training, like we said. In fact, I don't want any calorie restriction on those 5 days, because when you do a 36-hour fast, that's enough calorie restriction for the entire week. And you get all the benefits of the fast. And so then you complement that with what I call feasting. It feels like feasting, although just eat at your TEE. So for most people, about 1,800, 2,000 calories. So there's no deficit perceived by the body. So this is kind of like how we prevent plateaus from happening, because we are sort of cycling between the fast and the higher calorie days.
Oh, that's so fascinating because these medications, people like to say that you plateau, they stop working. I have some people that come to me and they're on the highest doses of Ozempic and Mounjaro, and it stopped working and they still have more weight to lose. It sounds like your flow method can really help reset that sensitivity so you can take lower doses. Am I getting that right?
Correct. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to it, but really in a nutshell, we use the lowest doses possible in the weight loss phase, fix the metabolic health, so that way we can decrease the dose and have them maintain on a microdose. That's like the upper level overview of how the program works.
Wow. I love that. Microdosing is the way to go, or low dosing, because I feel like microdosing means different things to different people. But do we
Totally does.
but do we both agree that most people are doing GLP-1s wrong?
Yes. Yes. 100%. I agree.
Yeah, what are they doing wrong?
Well, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do my best to contain. I'm gonna do my best to contain that answer, because of where it comes from. You know, the research that was done is built on a foundation. The narrative is that obesity is a chronic irreversible disease, which is funny. I have to say it's funny because it was never a chronic disease, and now all of a sudden it's a chronic disease. That's cool. We needed to get there. I just think it's funny that we didn't get there until we had the solution. Okay, fine. That's how business works. So we have a solution. So now we have the disease. It's chronic and irreversible. Now, I do agree obesity it is a disease, and it's a chronic disease, you know, but the irreversible, reversible, that's where I disagree.
Yes.
It's reversible. And any holistic practitioner, it's like, yeah, I do this all the time. That's what I do, is I reverse chronic disease. It's not established in the literature. So unfortunately, well, it can't be. All right. Well, then we have to have that whole conversation about things that are not in the literature yet. Does that mean it can't be possible? But I can go down a rabbit hole there too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So dosing it way too high and not perhaps doing the things that we'll call them the best practices of weight management, the best practices of how you would heal insulin resistance. There are best practices for lifestyle, nutrition, to insulin sensitivity. Let's just talk about how to increase your body's ability to metabolize food properly. What are your thoughts on that?
Just to finish off, they focused on more well-established practices, eat more protein, move the body. You know, everybody understands those are important. But where science still has years and years to catch up is metabolic health. And so because metabolic health itself isn't well established, they didn't push that narrative in the studies. They probably never would, but I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, so best practices, in my opinion, would be metabolic health centered practices. And that itself is a wide umbrella of things, but the two things that I focus on most in that umbrella is insulin resistance and inflammation. If we can bring the insulin resistance down, and optimal insulin resistance just means insulin sensitivity. So being as insulin sensitive as we can, and then controlling inflammation, bringing inflammation down as much as we possibly can. Those two things, if we focus on that, that seems to take care of everything else. Takes care of leptin, takes care of a lot of things. And there are a lot of roadblocks in front of those two things, like thyroid, hormones, cortisol. And so being able to identify those in the patients and figure out what lifestyle can address those things ultimately brings it down to controlling for insulin resistance, controlling for inflammation. And if we do that, That's where I notice the best outcomes, much lower doses, and the ability to microdose to maintain in the future.
I love it. So if someone who's listening today and they're like, okay, I'm struggling with my weight, therefore I must have some form of insulin resistance. I know I have inflammation. What can they do today to work on that?
If you're already on a GLP-1 medication, 85% of people are in this plateaued situation. Like I feel like because I do these calls every single day. And so if you're losing weight in a GLP-1 versus not, so if you're started a GLP-1, because our audience is obviously highly, GLP-1 listeners and users. And so if you are still losing weight, okay, fine, boom. You don't need to reset the metabolism yet. You're still losing weight, but you're probably severely under eating. So start eating more protein, start eating more healthy, nutritious food. Fix the whole, like, I have to starve myself in order to be successful. You got to fix that. You got to fix that. You need to eat more. Now, you start eating more food, you start resistance training, and then you start adding fasting so that you have higher calorie days around the fasting windows. And then you're boom, like that would be the most potent starting point. Now, if you're on GLP-1 medication, but now you're plateaued, well, you can't get into fasting yet. You have to fix the metabolism. We call that a reverse diet or a metabolic reset. So that's a specific 6 to 8 week process where we restore metabolic rate by increasing the caloric intake throughout the entire time. No therapeutic fasting yet. We do that, fix the metabolism, and then you transition into the prior protocol.
Beautiful. It's so interesting. So curious about a metabolic reset and how you do that. So you do that over 6 to 8 weeks, and essentially it's about increasing people's calories?
Correct. So the length of the time depends on how severely under eating they are. Most patients that I see, they're eating sometimes as low as 800 calories a day, 1,000, 1,200. Your average person at a maintenance, a healthy maintenance, should be closer to 1,800, 2,000. So yes, we need a calorie deficit to lose weight, but right now we want to restore normal function. So we got to get them all the way up to a net neutral 7 days a week to restore that hypothalamic thyroid function that's been down-regulated because they've been starving themselves over however many months they've been on the medication. Because no one told them when they started, hey, you need to make sure your deficit isn't too massive because you're going to trigger this reaction. And so that's how we fix that.
Mm. And if someone is just starting off brand new to GLP-1s, and let's say they aren't eating 800 calories a day, what's the right amount of calories to lose about a pound or two a week on a GLP-1? Would be the same best practice without a GLP-1?
I don't like daily calorie deficits. So daily calorie deficits are the way that I think get people into the inevitable plateau. Now, if we do a small deficit, that could probably work. So if we weren't doing fasting, a small deficit would still be, I'm not saying that's bad, that would be fine. So your average woman, she weighs 180 pounds. She's trying to get down to 150. She probably should be shooting for a daily, if she's not doing any weekly long fasting, she should be eating maybe like 1,600 calories, a good amount of protein, 1 gram of protein per pound of target body weight. That's an easy formula. So it takes out all the kilograms and the decimals. If you want to weigh 150, that's your target. Get about 150 grams of protein. That would do well. But our approach, I think, is better. We want you eating at your TE every single day, get through the intermittent fasting stage, and then start the weekly long fasting. Because once we get you into a 36-48, that's enough deficit for the entire week, and keep eating at your TEE, which is closer to 1,800, 2,000 on the other days.
What is TEE for the audience?
Total energy expenditure, or sometimes it's called TDEE, total daily energy expenditure.
Okay.
Which is essentially an estimation of how many calories that your body burns throughout the day. It consists of your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories you burn at rest. And then the rest of it is through your activity, intentional and non-intentional activity, that makes up your total daily energy expenditure, which is, for most people, about 2,000 calories. It's more for men, and it's more for heavier and more active people.
One of the things about GLP-1s that I think people love is that it, especially on the high doses, takes away their hunger. So it makes it really easy to eat less and lose weight. And unfortunately, they could be losing a lot of muscle. They're starving themselves. It's not ideal. So lower doses are often better because you can still feel your hunger. I consider hunger to be sacred. It's an important thing. It's good to have an appetite. Our body tells us what it's hungry for, what it needs. It's good to know when you're hungry. And that's one of the reasons I like microdosing, because you still feel hunger, just not intensely. If someone has been on a larger dose and is transitioning into microdosing, how do you help them reconnect to the natural hunger signals without freaking out? Because people get nervous about feeling hunger. How do you help them reconnect in a healthy way?
Hopefully they never disconnected to begin with, right? That's the thing. So from day number one, and I'm hopefully we'll have time to get into the whole mental piece, because to me that's huge. But this is part of the mental piece, connecting with the hunger. When patients come to us, they're either starting brand new on their journey or they're plateaued, right? So we do the reset, we fix them up, and then they're back into weight loss. So even for those people, we apply the low dosing strategy, which means the goal is to take the edge off the food chatter. So over here, you have extreme food chatter, which is pathologic, right? You can't control it. You eat crappy most of the time, and it's not good food. And then we have the extremic side, which I think everybody thinks is a good thing. And it's exciting, the allure of having no hunger at all, because if you never had any hunger, how easy would it be, right, to just live your life? That's what it looks like. But then you realize that that's, like you said, so far from natural, and it's not sustainable either. And you lose that. And so for me, the optimal dose is a dose that takes you in the middle. Well, a middle would be, that's normal. Like, you still have hunger. You still have cravings. Like, if you look at your guilty pleasure, an Oreo cheesecake, like, a normal person's like, man, I want to eat that. But you can decide if you're going to eat it now or later or never. That's good, healthy control, which comes from having a body that's functioning optimally and having a mental peace that's strong enough to say, oh, I'm going to eat it later. Like, Sunday through Thursday is my low carb part of the week. I tend to just avoid junk food entirely. And then the weekend, I let myself splurge as much as I want and I desire. If that's your operating basis, for example, like, that's kind of one of the things I like to live by and teach patients, is to have some days where you let whatever happen you want to happen. Weekends tend to be the good time for that. And then you're a little bit more structured and have a little bit more discipline on yourself when you're busier during the week.
Wow, that sounds like balance. That's so
Yeah.
healthy. Tell me about the mental piece. I can tell that that's very important for you, and it's such an important piece of my work as well. What does that mean for you, the mental strategy,
Yeah. Well,
mindset?
yeah, for sure. And it's fascinating when you look at the literature. So I'm going to kind of answer this in two parts. What do we know about mindset and weight loss in general? When you look at the literature, and I call them unicorns, right? Because we know lasting weight loss is almost non-existent. All the research shows that long-term weight maintenance, that's after loss, people that have lost over 10% of their body weight, they never keep it off. Well, the small percentage of people that have kept it off, I call them unicorns. Well, they've done large trials looking at the unicorns, trying to figure out, like, let's learn from them. What are they doing that makes it so special? Because you would understand why that's important to learn. Well, when they look at those studies, they find out that it's like, okay, so they exercise every single day. They have a system for tracking their calories every single day. They have strong supportive environments that can prevent anxiety, prevent depression. They have supportive groups. It's like, oh, okay, that's all I have to do? That's easy. Like, it all comes into the category of mental toughness and discipline. That's literally the only research-based category of successful strategies that have ever worked. So why wouldn't we take that over into GLP-1 however we can? And so for me, there's a couple pieces to it. It's, number one, remembering or learning for a lot of people that you're not your body, you're the thing that runs your body. And so, meaning when your body tells you you're hungry, you have the ability to exercise a decision and say, I'm not. And a lot of people have no reality. This gets a little spiritual and religious, and this is why I love fasting, because fasting does help people learn, which is why many religions use fasting. It helps people get more spiritually connected and aligned, because they realize, oh, I can separate myself from my body and not eat when my body's telling me that I need to eat. And so I think learning that is extremely important. I tell that to every single patient on my first coaching call. You are not your body. We don't need to get religious here. This is just a thing. And they learn that, they strengthen that understanding through the fasting. And that's a skill that aids you for the rest of your life, is just having that ability. So we really coach people into that and get them to understand that. And I do think that, like I said earlier, the two strategies for successful maintenance long-term, fixing the body, which is fixing the food chatter driving things in the body from a physiological standpoint, and then strengthening the mindset, developing some mental discipline, because you're going to need a combination of both to be successful in our world for the rest of your life.
Beautiful. So I could talk about mindset all day. Thank you for that. Really important. Really important. I want to talk about complementary peptides. I'm so interested in the other peptides. I know you have a lot of experience with it. I want to pick your brain. How do they work with GLP-1s? And for listeners who are curious, what peptide categories do you see as most supportive alongside GLP-1s?
The two main ones that we use, bar none, more than the other categories, the anti-inflammatory peptides, and then the fat loss, fat mobilizing peptides. Where would you like to start first?
Yeah, well, just even educate us. What are you named just two, the inflammatory, reducing inflammation,
Anti-inflammatories. Yep.
anti-inflammatory. What are
And then
those?
fat mobilizing. Yeah.
Fat mobilizing.
And then fat mobilizing. So we got BPC 157,
Mm-hmm.
KPV,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll mention low dose naltrexone. It's not a
Okay.
peptide. It's actually a drug, but it's in, as far as I'm concerned, it's in the same bucket of holistic anti-aging therapies. So low dose naltrexone. And then in the fat mobilizing space, the one that we've used bar none the most is AOD 9604. But you can talk about the growth hormone peptides here as well. And then there's some new ones that we're just starting to experiment with and play with. But increasing essentially what these two categories do, like the names imply, the fat mobilizing makes a person more metabolically flexible. So it turns that switch on faster. And then the anti-inflammatory ones reduce inflammation. And so those are two powerful things to get the person's moving in the direction of improving metabolic health and supporting the goal.
And what does that look like practically? So people that are taking a GLP-1, they're injecting usually once a week, maybe sometimes twice a week, once a month. It's an injection. If they're also doing other peptides, are they just injecting themselves daily, or how does that work out?
There's many routes of administration for peptides. Injection subcutaneously, just like the GLP-1 is the most common route. But there are peptides that you can take orally. Some of them are orally bioavailable. There are some peptides that can be applied as a cream. There are peptides that can be applied in a troche, actually something that looks like this.
Okay. What is it? For people that are just listening, what is it? What is a troche?
Yeah, troche is a method of medication administration. It's a little cube, a little rectangle kind of thing that you pop in between your teeth and your gum. And it sits there and it slowly breaks down and absorbs through the oral buccal mucosa. There's a lot of circulation and blood flow there. So you can get your medication into your body that way, bypass the whole GI tract.
Yeah. And a doctor I was talking to recently was explaining to me there's over 300 different peptides that are out there, and they're just strings of amino acids. So they're natural.
Yeah. So it's funny. I sometimes kind of pull these things out here to kind of help us represent, but each one of these little circles represent an amino acid. And I love this model because it actually gives you a conceptual understanding that peptides are three-dimensional, and you can literally have the same amino acids in it, but one of them is bent a different way. And because it's bent a different way, it's got a completely different conformation and a different effect in the body. But really, in a nutshell, peptides are just amino acids, short chains of amino acids. And I'm always going to quote Dr. Seeds. He defines peptides as the language of the human body. And it's so beautiful because that's what they are. There are signaling agents. Your body releases peptides to cause certain other areas of your body to do certain things, kind of like a hormone. So most people can think of hormones. Peptides are close enough to a hormone where if you can kind of make that parallel, you'll have a pretty dang good understanding of what they are.
It's fascinating. And when people take additional peptides with their GLP-1, which is also a peptide, does it enhance the results? Do you lose more weight? Do you burn more fat? Do you have a better experience?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above. Yeah. So, the two categories we talked about, we want to enhance fat mobilization. We want to reduce inflammation. But yeah, the idea behind using the peptides, when you're using them with a knowledgeable, educated practitioner that knows how to put these things together for you, then yes, you are going to enhance your results. And I think the biggest thing is being able to stay on a lower dose of a GLP-1. That I'm going to bring it back to that. There is something, GLP-1s are amazing, but you need to have the goal of, I want to use GLP-1s. How can I stay on the lowest dose? I came across somebody who mentioned I'm not going to say who it was, but he was shunning the idea of low dosing. And I almost thought he was talking about my content, but I don't think he fully understood what I was trying to say. I wasn't shaming anybody for not. His particular thing was like, there's nothing special about being on a lower dose. And I'm like, actually there is. Because it's a game, it's a goal here. By making that goal of how can I stay on the lowest dose, well, it forces you to then rely on other strategies, whether it be peptides or whether it be lifestyle interventions. If you don't come to reality and confront that, then what ends up naturally happening is you don't gravitate towards other things and you just rely ultimately, like to more GLP-1. And the problem with that is then you run into undereating problems because people are literally forcing food down their throat and they can't do it. They can't do it. And then you start getting into the no hunger area, which is so prevalent and so common with these patients. They just completely forgot about hunger because they're on these massive doses. And so GLP-1s are powerful, but like anything, too much power isn't a good thing. You want the right amount of power.
100%. And it makes people, their skills of naturally taking care of their health, doing all of the lifestyle things, working on their sleep, their gut health, their inflammation, their metabolic health, things that you can do without any sort of medical intervention, without the peptide. If you rely completely on the medication, it doesn't work out very well.
100%. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And that's all the horror stories you hear about. It's so funny because people sometimes like, they'll catch me on a live, like, are you pro GLP-1? Depending on when they come in, they think I'm not because most of what I'm super holistically grounded. But depending on what you heard of my content, you might think that I'm not because it's so different than what every other pro GLP-1 creator, how they approach it. I'm very pro GLP-1, but I'm also holistically grounded and I understand the importance of using them as a tool and forcing yourself to rely on other interventions because then that causes your responsibility to rise. And it is a very known fact that if you increase your responsibility, which to me, the definition in this context would be your ability and agreement to be the cause of something. That's what responsibility is. Personal responsibility means I'm the cause, not someone else. No excuses here, right? And so if I raise my responsibility over something, then I automatically, by default, have more control over it. So we want more control over our weight. We want more control over our health. Well, all you got to do is agree to be more responsible about it, and you will automatically gain more control. But people, they're not taught this. They don't think like this. And so automatically their responsibility drops. And that's a little bit of it's not their fault. It's the system that we're in is kind of built that way to kind of keep people dependent. But I'll just leave it at that.
Amen. And there's that beautiful mindset piece again. That's gorgeous. A theme I see over and over that people fail on GLP-1 protocols is because they don't have the education, the coaching piece, the accountability, the nutrition support, strength training. From your experience, what elements of coaching or support make the biggest difference in long-term success? I know that's a big part of what you do.
Believe it or not, it's just the accountability. The accountability, of course, I want to say the protocol. The protocol is the best thing, but if that were the case, I would just put a course online and everybody would be able to do the course and implement the stuff on their own and have a nice day. That doesn't actually work because then, all my stuff is on YouTube for free. Every now and then do hear people, and I love it when they tell me in comments, your YouTube videos have saved my life because I just did the things that you said. And, but unfortunately, most people can't. So you need the protocol. You need the right protocol. But that's just knowledge. You need the self-help at implementation. And anytime somebody says, I don't need coaching, first of all, I respect the finances. Like that's a huge piece, and I get it. But if we just kind of table the finances for a second, because that's a fair consideration to not do coaching. Tom Brady, if you're a football fan and know who he is, has a coach. The greatest of the greats have coaches because they understand fundamentally that I could always get help. And there's always room for improvement. And that's where coaching comes in. And specifically, the room for improvement is helping to keep somebody accountable, working with them to help them implement at their own rate, at their own capacity. I'll get people that are like, I'm ready to do everything right now. And I'm like, okay, let's go. I'll meet them at their energy level. And then I have people that are like, they sign up, they pay all this money, and I can't get them to do a damn thing. And then I have to get with them and meet them at their level and say, well, can we just try this one thing? Can we just try this one thing? and then they do it, and then they have a win, and then we build on them. And we build, at that rate. So it's being able to meet them at their level and find a comfortable rate that is doable for them, because people got crazy lives and responsibilities and obligations and stress, and so you got to meet them out where they're at, I think is huge.
I love the work you do, Dr. Jones, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. Your YouTube channel is amazing. I know you have programs. I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes, and guys, you got to check him out. He's the real deal, and I feel like we're very aligned. Thank you for being here, Dr. Jones. I appreciate you sharing your journey with us, and I can really hear the arc of your own transformation. I think you're aware of that. The hero's journey. It's from struggle to strength, and how you use that experience to help others do the same. Thank you for being here. And before we go, because we're trying to keep this within the hour here, what are you most excited about in the next 18 months?
Personally, winning some volleyball tournaments, but that's completely that's my one jam, is I like to play competitive volleyball. But no, for real, the advancements of peptides and GLP-1s, the advancements of both, I think the GLP-1s are pretty much as good as I need them to be. So I'm actually more excited about, we could have talked about retatrutide, we could have talked about all those, maybe another show, but
yes,
but the non-GLP-1 peptides, just the access, the rumblings I've heard about, RFK, before he went into office, he said he was going to promote peptides and get them out there. So I've heard some stuff is happening. I don't know. We'll see. But I think access, affordability, just acceptance of this, and it looks like it's starting to happen. So I'm super excited for that, because I think peptides are just as essential as GLP-1s in their own way to help people beat this thing.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely bring you back on if you can find the time. I would love to continue this beautiful healing conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.